Thank you, Phil, so much. And thank you everyone for being here. I'm going to take you to Siberia so we can cool off from Southern California heat. And speaking of Fulbright, if COVID dies down, I will be having another Fulbright and it will be in Siberia, postponed till April. But I'm going to start in St. Petersburg, which has been my home in Russia for 25 years, back and forth. There's a big festival every June called the White Nights because the sun never sets. And this poem mentions that. White Nights. Midnight could be noon, people strolling on the embankment, unable or unwilling to tell the difference. Drunken song and linked arms. It is January, I love, when night tucks into the corners of the city with piles of snow pushed against the curb. The blinking lights of the Blini Cafe, the samovar's breath puffing against the front window. Walking back from the metro, blackness presses against the Soviet bloc apartments until they are indistinguishable. Darkness untamed even in this major metropolis. The day I took the wrong minibus ended far from the city, the fear of never getting back, picturing my wool coat curled beneath the birches, a small animal. Not that the bus left me so far out, but alone on a road past a half-frozen lake, a shabby church with a midnight cupola, no English in sight. I crossed the road, stamped my feet to keep from numbing, a prayer to keep my tongue from losing its agility. A man pulled a sled piled with firewood on a path that was no path. I waited. So the next poem is a prose poem. I went on a Russian tour, which was interesting, a 2-day bus tour out as sort of pilgrimage to Pushkin's estate. And one word here, Baba Yaga is a character in Russian folklore who's sort of the boogeyman, boogie woman, and she makes an appearance in the poem. On the way to the Pushkin Hills. A blue-black bruise expanding. Night, conversations shrink to staccato pricks, row by row. 2 Americans hurtling into the Russian countryside. Wonder only briefly if the bus were to crash, would we ever be identified? Another village, small curls of smoke, carved window frames, snowfalls, mounds rise from the roadside as if they will soon meet. Nearing midnight, we slow down to enter a barely paved road through a dense forest. Branches scrape the roof. I half expect Baba Yaga to thrust from behind a trunk, stop the bus with a flick of her wrist. We pull beside a small wooden structure, more hostile than hotel, stumble out bleary-eyed. Light draws us in, moth-like. We leave our passports at the desk and stumble upstairs, the room bare as a monk's cell. I peer out the window at white stripes of birch trees. This country so vast, we so far from anywhere. A young couple, newlyweds we are told, step out the front door. Fur tight against her neck, she raises an arm to light a cigarette, its tip red as a fox's eyes against the night. So we'll move from Russia to Southern Oregon, where I had an artist residency a couple of years ago. Driving on Highway 31, Summer Lake, Oregon. Rounding a bend, it wasn't the black ice that startled me from tedium, but the white church perched on the hillside. No road, no driveway, no trees. Just scrub low to the ground, bleached of color. No cross on its roof bearing the promise of heaven, no sign declaring its allegiance. Abandoned by the mother church or too few locals to support it. Its pastor lured to a city where pews can fill, a flock to follow his sermons. The front facade a ghostly presence, not even a handle on its double doors. Can a person ever find salvation? A cardboard cutout, its generations of stories locked inside or thrust out, strewn across this desolate two-lane highway as lumber trucks roar by, scattering pebbles in their wake. So we'll move back to Siberia. The only two times I was in Siberia, I was in a city near the Mongolian border in the Republic of Buryatia, and the city is called Ulan-Ude. January. It is cold. I am in Siberia. Why should I be surprised? The temperature does not fall, too cold for such sudden movement. It inches downward, always and only in one direction. At 2 a.m., I could not sleep. Looking out the window, mounds of snow seemed to pulse, as if they needed to move to stay alive. In the morning, a blackbird pecked along a bare branch, like hands feeling along black and white keys to coax out a melody. I used to think a man crouched under a piano, hitting his little hammer on the strings to release the notes. The bird gives up, flies away. They say the young are leaving Ulan-Ude for Petersburg, for Moscow, abroad. What kind of life is left here? The steel factory closed, its great painted doors bolted, as if there were anything left inside. Even the ghosts of Soviet bosses have decamped to a Cyprus beach or the fading boardwalks of Sochi. Before I left home last week, a man froze to death in Chicago, sitting on church steps, a porch. I don't remember. Think of the men who carry down the rigid body, seated as if on a throne, or like the groom carried on a chair at his wedding, and the poor bride hanging on for dear life, grasping a white handkerchief, as her husband catches the other end, a symbol, perhaps, of the fragility of marriage. No wonder Los Angeles has the highest number of homeless. Winters mild, rain now scarce. But further north, fires with voracious appetites do not subside in autumn. No such thing as fire season anymore. So I took a side trip to Irkutsk, which is a city of, I think, 750,000. It's a pretty big city in eastern Siberia. Very interesting. The Silk Road had been through there, so there's a big Jewish community, big Korean community, lots of different people live there. And this is called, it is even colder in Irkutsk. Oh, the temperatures are in Celsius, so don't worry. It is even colder in Irkutsk. I no longer understand numbers. -22, -32. What's the difference? Branches covered in a sheen of white, fingers slicked in a second skin, a breeze barely audible, shudders twigs and snaps icicles. It's not that Siberians don't get cold, they say, but that they know how to dress. Sable, mink, black Persian lamb, fur hats round as kitchen knobs perch on women's heads. Yesterday at a lecture, the other women wore muted shades, gray, lavender, beige. Why, when this Siberian world must crave color to survive the long winter? The Angara River that slices Irkutsk is frozen, though fishermen cut holes to catch the prize amul even in January. How strange it will be to return to California, the temperature rarely dipping below 50 Fahrenheit, where I am often cold. Okay. So the next poem is called On Flying for the First Time to Siberia. It's true, I was nervous. It didn't help that my local travel agent instructed me to buy the tickets in the US, just in case. Not exactly a believer, I hedged my bets, tucked a copy of a sacred book, the Tanya, in my carry-on. The irony of a Lubavitcher Rebbe exiled to Siberia a century before. Packed the travel icon a friend gave me on my last trip to Russia. I tried to block memory of a news video, a flight crew scraping ice off the wings of a Tupolev 154 on a Siberian runway, as routine as de-icing the windshield of a car parked in an upstate driveway. Shuffling in a long line at gate 34, Sheremetyevo Airport, Siberia Air Flight 115, Moscow to Ulan-Ude. I eyed the other passengers. I was the only American on board. Squeezed near the last row between two thick Buryat men, I gripped the armrests as if they were the handlebars of a Harley, the task of revving the engine for takeoff, mine alone. An hour in, vast snowfields unfurled, pockmarked by tiny villages spouting chimney smoke. No seat vacant, the hum of conversation quieted, the sky darkening, another 5 hours to go. A mumble of Hebrew rose from my lips for a safe flight and landing, that I be met on the other end, that I would see my family again. So the sister of a colleague in that city was studying to be a shaman. They practice in this area of Siberia a mixture. There are Russian Orthodox, but the Buryats practice a mixture of Buddhism and shamanism. Apprentice Shaman. Days she works in a Soviet-era factory, the lathe creaky as if it had arthritis, her thick fingers not as nimble as they once were, but night she studies with a Buryat shaman to prepare for her real work. If the universe is divided into three worlds, the upper, the earth, the underworld, that day on the banks of Lake Baikal, the apprentice shaman hovered among them. Trees hung with ribbons, red for supplication to the sun spirits, green to protect nature, blue for spirits of the sky. We stood on a bank that jutted over the water. Waves of ice were frozen mid-motion, sharp as incisors in the sub-zero cold. A blue so bright it hurt the eyes. Holding a drum tambourine to her chest, she beat and chanted to summon the spirits. That night we lay on cots in the one-room cabin. A growl escaped her lips as if a Siberian wolf were trapped inside, threatening or protecting. I did not know which. So this is called Russian Chocolates. And Russian chocolate is delicious, higher cacao and less sugar. Russian chocolate. I never knew I had patriotism until I moved to Russia. Now I fight the urge to justify all the things I criticized back home. The apartment building staircase reeks of urine. Communal space is not valued here. Cigarette butts mound in the lobby. Piles of dirty snow line the street. Why can't you camp wherever you want in America? A fellow instructor in Ulan-Ude asks. We wait to be rescued by the bell. So many topics we cannot understand about one another. How I wanted my children to go away for university. How she will decide her children's careers. My Siberian colleagues like it when I recite all I love about Russia, but suspicious too. They perceive life in the US is easier. What is your background? Living in Russia, I am often asked this question. In America, a code for, you don't really belong here. This is not your home. Here, men from the Caucasus are yanked from the metro escalator by police demanding their papers. Back home, men and women of color are pulled over while driving. On a tram the other day, a young man yelled at my landlady to go back to Israel, a country she has never been to. I used to think that would never happen in America, but that was then. On a break between classes, someone has set out a plate of cookies and Russian chocolates wrapped in brightly decorated foil. Put the kettle on for tea. This ritual, so important, civilizing. So I'll close with two more poems. This one sort of Los Angeles and mostly Los Angeles. This vine, that country. The vine is strangling the orange tree, squeezing its branches. This morning, more unavoidable news of the irrational president. I spot the morning glory wrapped around the metal poles that secures the fence between unfriendly neighbors. If a week goes by without ferocious yanking, the vine sneaks up on another portion of green, threatens to overtake a new corner of the garden. Maybe I've grown intolerant. Too many friends nudge and wink, asking, is Putin my friend? Do I have any news? Since I have lived in Russia for long periods, in his hometown, the irony of an imperial city with its imposing palaces, art and ballet, now famous as the birthplace of the KGB president, not lost on anyone. A choice like that for an American, a Californian even, bewilders them. I am often at a loss to explain the pull. I recognize it in other smitten Americans who talk about Russia's raw beauty, its literature and deep friendships, despite the corruption, troubling prejudices. How we are still foreigners, regardless of the years there. Maybe it's like this vine after all, a stubbornness, no logic to it, just a persistence that refuses to die. And I'll end with a COVID poem. But I wanted to show you, there's one word you might not know, it's khata, and that is a Tibetan prayer shawl, but they use it in Buryatia too, and I was given one before I left to come home. So this is called Flags in a Time of Plague. Flags painted by children crisscross a small front garden, fecund with giant banana leaves and poppies 2 feet high after a surprising April rain. I want to scold the flags for not social distancing. This morning, a woman on her cell phone did not see me, and I yelled, I admit it, afraid she would bump into me as I jogged by. It feels like months and months confined when it's only 6 weeks, another 8 until the end of the semester. And how can I possibly grade all those papers when all I want is to collapse on the couch and watch movies? A year ago, January, I squished in a Jeep with 4 Siberian colleagues for a drive to Lake Baikal. Bare trees dotted the desolate road, their branches strung with Tibetan prayer flags. Bright blue khatas flapped in the wind. The driver tossed coins from his window. An hour later, we stopped to drop rubles in the lap of a Buddha. Now in Los Angeles, I unfurl a Buryat khata out my apartment window, pleading with it to bring compassion and calm, both in short supply. So thank you very much.